Hello students, today is November 11th. So the lecture for the week 14 is on the 14th October Uprising. So I will give you a quick browse of the lecture today, okay? First, we will looking at the chronology, the events, historical events, what happened from Sri to Thanong, okay? About government and political parties, and then what is the problem with the new government, and also the Constitution of 1968, and end up with very unstable government. So next we'll look at the coup of 1971. Okay, this is another coup by Thanong. Okay. And so what the implication for this coup, and also the effect on political system, okay, and the government in general, okay. And then the next is the important part of this lecture is the so-called 14th October Uprising. This is the first students and people, mass demonstrations against the government in October 14, 1973, which led to the overthrow of the Thanong government. All right. I will go into detail that later, but give you the quick look, okay. And then this is the picture of that day, October 14, okay. And the king came out that night to call for peace, okay. And then after October 14, how the new constitution and the new parliament, appointed. So this is something, that nobody knew much about that history. So I'm going to tell you on what happened, okay. That we call Loyal People Assembly, Raja Pracha Samasai, okay. How the king appointed the assembly, to draft the new constitution, all right. And then with the new constitution, new elections and government, but the situation was not good at that time, after 74 constitution, okay. There's many protests, demonstrations, and counter protests by the Red Goals, okay, Kating Dang, and Nawapon group, the so-called loyalist group, that anti-student groups and movements, end up at the tragic, history on October 6, 1976, when the armed forces of all kinds, combined forces, came into surrounded Thammasat University on October 6 in the morning and massacre, kill unarmed protesters, and look at the pictures, some were hanged, okay. That's the end of the so-called October, history from beginning to end, 3 years, okay. But second part, we will go into analysis, okay. Try to answer, why students became the force that led to changes in government and many issues related, what we call social reforms, okay, happened in that period, okay. So if you look at what I call new waves, คลื่นลูกใหม่ new waves, they were new men and new women of the 70s generation. So who are they? Okay, we'll look at that, okay. And next, we'll look at the main factors that for influence, impacted, the formation of new group, new economy even new politics in Thailand from Sarit to Thanong period and ended in the October student uprising. That was American impact on Thai society. Okay, and this is the sample of student magazines, journals. Okay, many students, reflected their ideas, at that time, of disappointment with the political and social system at that time. Okay, and this is the poem, in Thai to a political intellectual. Okay, I'll give you more detail later. Okay, this is the sample of the magazine, progressive magazine, at that time, Social Science Review. Okay, so this is how students form their ideas. Another source of student movement was revival of Marxism in Thai intellectuals. Okay, you must have heard about Marxism. This is the famous, influential, most powerful, radical ideas, created by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, the German philosopher, radical activist, in 19th century Europe, and widespread to all over in Europe and into Latin and into the revolutionary movement, because Marxism, teach about the new society called communism. Okay, so sometimes we call Marxism as a communism. Okay, yeah. They also have a big role in Thailand too, into the 70s. Okay, and this is the sample of the intellectual at that time who influenced by Marxism. Jit Pumisak, a student in Faculty of Arts, Chulalongkorn. Okay, and student at Jula Faculty of Arts just honor Jit Pumisak, make an apology event, last week on the event of his punishment, from the Chulalongkorn student. We will talk about that later. Okay, and we're going to look up the practice of students at that time. So what kind of practice that they use, from theory to practice. And then also about new era of democracy at that time, came out. Okay. And then I will end up with points for you to think about. Okay. And then give you some reading, and video clip, I try to upload here, but it didn't work. So I gave you the clip so you can watch it at home by yourself. It's about 5 minutes, not too long. All right. So we can start now. Yeah. Okay, let's start with Thanong government. It's easy to remember because last week we discussed about Sarit after the two coups that Sarit, initiated, and accomplished. Okay, and led to the development policy, change Thailand society, economy. Now we came to the legacy of Sarit into Thanong government. In December 8, 1963, Sarit died from his liver. Okay, at that time, political parties, and elections, were banned. Okay, not allowed. So there's no democracy practicing, no parliament, no constitution except the interim, which the Sarit called, his little constitution. Okay. So the next thing, when you have no election, no democratic process, of succession, okay, it's fall to the leader, the military leader, who has the most power after Sarit will succeed him. That was General Thanom Kittikachorn, who was deputy second hand, to Soviet from 1947. Okay, when they participate in the coup of 1947 together. Okay, so Thanom always follow Soviet closely, in everywhere, including participate in every coup and helping Soviet. Okay, so during Soviet period, because Soviet was ill, he went mostly spent time in hospital, and in his little harem, he has many mistresses from beauty queens, okay, of Thailand. Okay, so he spent time, with women and drinking. Most of the job been done by Thanom as deputy prime minister at that time. Okay, so Thanom looked after the military, the army, and the government, and the other, political groups. Okay, so Thanom became the prime minister, and then he did not use the Soviet, strong hand. Okay, like a strong man, style, no execution, no imprison of the opposition. The Catholic already arrested most of them, and some of them released after Sirleaf died. Okay, so Thanom had no problem, no opposition left to make trouble for him. Okay, and so under Thanom, the society seemed to be quite quiet. No demonstration, no protest, no criticism. In newspaper also quiet because they're still under censorship. Okay, so Thanom think everything looks okay. But then in about 1968, that is about 8 years. People start complaining that how come the constitution took so long, to finish? It drafted, from 1962, no, even before that, so it's set up that drafting assembly, assembly, National Assembly, to draft the constitution, and so it told them, don't hurry, we don't in a rush, we don't need it now, because happy, to come up without the constitution, So finally, newspapers start asking, and students and people, asking Thanom, that come on, 8 years is really long in this world. No country, take this long to draft a constitution. Okay, so Thanom said, okay, let's get it done. So June 20th, finally the final draft finished. So the government promulgated and announced the use of the new constitution of 1968. All right. I remember because that was the year that I entered Thammasat as a freshman. My first year, I came with the new constitution. Okay. All right. So soon, this new constitution, allow political parties to function. So the old party, the old politicians came to register in old party or new party whatsoever, The old party was Democrat Party, Prachatipat. This was the number one, the oldest, and also survived many years of coup, of takeover, of dissolution. Democrat Party is still around until now, okay? But at the same time, the government under Thanom also set up so-called government party in the name of Saha Pracha Thai Party, SPT, Sopoto, okay, ready to run for election. All right, so February 10, 1969, election started. This was the 11th election, that means. From 1932 to 1969, they already had only 10 elections. Okay. And then we have only 40 parties, contested for that election, but only 7 parties elected, plus many independent MPs, member of parliaments, okay, half or almost half of them independent. That means no party, okay. At that time, the independent party is still allowed, but not now. Now, the MP cannot run as independent. You have to belong to a party, okay. All right. So there was a new government with, of course, the government party, finally, able to suck, okay, do other party, to come into that party. SPD became the majority party, but they have to combine, with small parties and independent MPs. Okay, so what does it mean? That means, the government party, SPD, actually cannot control, cannot, supervise most of the MPs under their control, under their party. Okay. So finally, when, the budget bill, and tax increase bill, this is very important. The so-called money bills, came into the parliament. The government MPs, not support. They try to debate and they criticize the government, and the government try to negotiate and compromise with MP, but they did not comply. They did not silent. So if the government lost their vote on budget bill, the government, according to the constitution and the tradition, of democratic parliamentary system, the government must resign, okay, and then or dissolve the parliament and call for new election. But Thanom didn't don't do that. So he want to force the MP, to vote for the budget, for tax bills, Turn out that he cannot force all the MPs, to follow his design or his wishes. Okay, so what he gonna do? All right, I'm gonna give you the answer here, but let's look around. After election, the government has to give freedom to the newspaper, okay, but they still control some of them, okay. So the newspaper not happy with Thanom. So they now criticize the government, they criticize the policy, and they call for more freedom, okay, no control of the press, okay. And then the government, the military, the army, wasn't sure that the court, the Supreme Court, in the judiciary, the faction, gonna support them, So they try to intervene, in judicial system by impose that someone that they think that will follow the government into the structure of to be the judges, promoted people that they like. So they also got the resistance, from the judges and from Thammasat students. Okay. And next, foreign policy also not very good for the government, because now American, came to Thailand a lot, and American government pressured Thanom to send Thai troops to fight in South Vietnam. Before that, sent to Korea and now sent to Vietnam, and the government cannot explain to Thai people why Thai soldiers went to war, to fight war, Vietnam War, in South Vietnam, in Saigon. Even though they said, oh, we have to fight against communist Vietnam. But people will ask, but that communist Vietnam is not communist in Thailand. Why don't you fight communist Thailand? But you fight against the Vietnamese communists. That's like make a trouble for Thai security, because that means you become the enemy of the Vietnamese people. Okay, And then the report, from the newspaper about corruption, in the government, in bureaucracy, officials, also, became more news rampant, at that time. All overall, situation in 1971, only 2 years after the government, came to power, it looked like the government, could not govern, could not handle, problems, the criticism, from various groups. Okay, so make it feel like the government is unstable, even though most of them, belong to the army. The army still, support, the government, but the civilians are the people, and including political parties, did not fully support government and their policies. Okay, so with this situation, what Thanom gonna do? So he simply follow, the sample in the past when the army government, the military government could not control, could not govern. They made another coup. Okay, so 1971 in November, Thanom made a coup, ran the armored tanks, in front of the TV, stereo, radio, and then announced, okay, we finished this government. We're gonna start a new government, because it was Thanom who overthrew Thanom government. It's not other people from the army. Okay, so only in Thailand, that the army, made a coup against, his own government. Okay, so after the coup, the same thing happened. Abolish the parliament, abolish the constitution, abolish political parties, abolish press freedoms. Okay, and then the junta, okay, set up, created the called National Administrative Council to govern the country. So in the name of the military government, this is the name of the council. Okay. All right. So Thanom think everything will be calm down, quiet, because they also issue the martial law. That means, no one can go outside your home, after 8 o'clock at night, blah blah blah, no president, no nothing. So he think that everything will be quiet, but it's not true, because this time, the student began to form their own, organization called the National Student Center of Thailand, NSCT. Okay, NSCT, actually, not supposed to be political. It's supposed to be an exchange student, with Japan, with other countries, and then the build this, someone, suggests, okay, why don't we build, a national center, like other countries, they have center of student exchange, something, But then in 72, the Secretary General of the NSCT, his name was Thirayut Bunmi, said, okay, that time, Thailand, was, losing money, in terms of economic, a little crisis, because we import many goods before we import goods from America. Now, we import more goods from Japan. Japan became the next big country, in Asia now, So, so students said, okay, since we don't have enough budget, no money, so people have to buy the Thai, so we should boycott Japanese goods, okay, and businesses, because Japanese business came to dominate Thai government, Thai economy, okay, so that one thing. And next was the so-called Thung Yai incident. Thung Yai, this is the national park in the Naleswan National Park, okay, and the army under Narong Kitikajon, the son of Tanom, took the friends, and movie stars, to hunting. And on the way back, and they also stay in a camp inside the national park, which is illegal. No one can camping or hunting in the national park, okay? And then on the way back, the helicopter crashed. So that's why, broke the news. Newspaper reported that Narong, the Major Narong, and friends, and crash inside the national park, and then people know, so why they get in? They do the camping, they do hunting. No, that's illegal. That's against the law. So students, came, to protest, okay, and try to get the government, to prosecute, the case, but nothing happened. Okay, right? So student, published a book, called Thung Yai Incident, lay out, what happened, but the director of Lam Kam Hang University, where students, published this magazine, expelled 9 students, okay, from Lam Kam Hang. So that drew, the mass of students, to come out, to protest in 1972 about July. Yeah, in July, okay. And for the first time, that more than 20,000 students came out, to Democracy Monument, and stay overnight for the first time, okay, to protest, demonstrate against the government, corruption, and everything, now that came the same thing like you saw now every week, the students came out to protest against this government, okay. Finally, the government, said, okay, we negotiate, you go back, and the government will finish the new constitution so that there will be election and there will be new government. That will be the end of the junta of this National Administrative Council, okay, kind of return to democracy. Okay, so December 1972, the National Assembly, gathered, and then they announced the interim constitution of 1972, okay. But students demand that there must be a real constitution. So the government promised that, okay, 3 months, we will give you the new constitution, okay. So 3 months was on October 1973, okay. So the student, knew that the government would not finish the constitution, okay. So the government, created a group called Constitutional Movement, okay, demand the constitution. So on October 6th, the student came out to distribute leaflets calling for government to finish constitution within this month in October, okay. And students were arrested, okay. This is the 13 students arrested, okay, and they jailed the students and 2 ajahn lecturers, and 1 politician, former politician Khai Sang, okay. So students at Thamathasat, start, from October 7, to October 14, a week, of demonstration inside the campus. We didn't go outside. Starting from 100 to 1,000, and from 1,000 to 10,000. Every day, people coming, students, every major university, high school students came to join the at Thammasat Thapajan campus, every day, until 100,000 people, occupy the whole campus. So people will, some of them stay overnight, but many went back and they came back in the morning, okay. And so finally, the government tried to negotiate, with the student, center, but students said no until this the 13, arrest return, we will not stop, demonstration. Okay, so 14 October was the deadline. Okay, so students move out. Okay, actually the march was on 13, not 14. The 14 is the shooting. The 13 was the marching. So the march left Thammasat, midday at noon, and marched, to Democracy Monument. The line, occupied the whole street, you can see, from the picture, many pictures, okay, like this one, you can see 100,000 people, occupy Democracy Monument, okay. And so in the evening, they walk to theจุฬาจอมเกล้า Plaza ลานพระบรมรูปทรงม้า okay, the King Chulalongkorn, Plaza, okay, and waiting for the government, at night, the government said, okay, they already released, the 13 students, okay, so everyone go back home, no more, demonstration, okay. But most of them, cannot go back because it's too late, to catch a bus or taxi to go home, so they slept, at around, at the plaza, or the Dusit Zoo, Soon Dusit, okay. The morning, at 6 o'clock, they start walking back, and then met with the police, on the Rajviti Road, near the Suwajirada Palace, intersection. The police did not allow students to pass that road. They said to students, you have to go back. And students said, no, we cannot walk back, it's too far, We want to walk there, in order to go to the Sanghi Bridge, okay? And you go back home, No point, and then some students throw the bottles, and from little, skirmishes, someone, start shooting, the shot fly, and then, uprising, started, from there, the student went back to Thammasat, went back to Democracy Monument, and then they formed the group, start to battle, with the government forces, the army sent their army tank coming out, so the uprising, riot, broke out, people, start, burn down the Lottery Bureau, the Public Relations Office, Gomachar Sampan. At that time, the public relations still at the next to Democracy Monument on Rajadamnern Avenue, okay. So the whole building, burned, into fire, okay. And then, so this is October 14, all day, until evening, about 8 o'clock, evening, the king, finally appeared on TV, okay. This is the king on television at night, okay. And the king called an end to uprising, and then appointed Professor Sanya Thammasak, who at that time he was the Privy Councillor, Ongkamonti, president of the Privy Councillor, okay, and also the rector of Thammasat University at that time. So Professor Sanya was appointed as Prime Minister of the new government. Professor Sanya said later, he did not know. No one told him. The king did not consult him before appointment. So he knew it later, that he was appointed to be the new prime minister at that time, okay. But the situation still not fully calm, because Thanom Papat still, in the country, and then they still have some power over the army. So the new government have to force Tanom, Papat, and Nalong to leave the country. The trio tyrants finally left the country a few days later. So that was the end of rioting, uprising, and all kinds of violence. Okay. Okay, next I'm going to move to the political development after the uprising. Okay, what happened? Because the new government didn't have parliament, didn't have the assembly, to issue law, to do any, consulting. Okay, so the king got an idea, from some advisors that the king could appoint 2,000 members, to act like a national assembly, and then these 2,000 members, then elect 299 members of the parliament. That's always the number of the member of parliament at that time, 299 members. So once this new member function as the legal national assembly, then they can draft the new constitution. Okay. So the government announced that okay, will take 3 months and the new constitution come out. Okay. So what about this idea of in Thai we call Racha Pacha Samasai, or loyal people assembly? What does it mean? Okay. Mom Rajawong Kukrit Pramod, at that time he was the owner and editor of Siamrat newspaper. Okay. He also was the politician under Democrat Party. Okay. With Seni Pramod, his brothers, and Kuong Apayawong, the leader of Democrat Party at that time. Okay. Kukrit was the loyalist. Okay. So he got an idea. He said, the loyal people assembly combine absolutism with democracy. Okay. So this idea will give more power to the king. Okay. More than the absolute system gave the king in the past. Okay. At the same time, this idea also give more power to the people, more than they receive in the Thai democracy system. Okay, so sounds good. All right. That means, combine both, the old idea of absolutism with the new idea of democracy, to be the loyal people assembly. Okay. Now, if you look at Prince Dani idea that we looked at last time, the concept of Thai kingship, the old Thai ruling system, the king and people are one and reciprocal to each other. That means the king and the people, never, separate in the Thai society, Thai system from Kung Sukhothai, the first Thai city-state. The king and the people, always, reciprocal, that means, working together, give and take. The king give protection. The people give your loyalty and work, okay? Give your work, your labor to the palace, okay? So the king and people never been enemies to each other. Actually, the Thai system, they try to tell people that, no, never at any time in the history that the king and people, been enemies, hostile to each other. Never. They always been good to each other. Okay. So this idea became popular, among conservatives. I mean, after 1947, when the conservatives began to have more power in the government with the Democrat Party, okay. So they believe that, if we make Thai democracy with, the king as the head of state, and the king, and the people are one, so the government, even though came by army, will achieve, unity as one, It's very brilliant idea, but it never happened anywhere in the world except in Thailand, okay. So according to this idea, they explain. So don't worry, when coups by the army happen, the so-called sovereign power goes back to the monarchy, okay. And then, when you said that when the new government came, the king simply, give this sovereign power back to the government, okay. So it's as if like nothing happened, okay. The so-called legitimacy never broke down because the king, step in, to be a bridge, between the coups and the legitimate government, okay. So this is the way looking. If you look from the other side, okay, for those who are critical of the role of the monarchy in politics, they will say this is intervention of the monarchy to make, the coup, legitimate by sanction the coup, okay. So make the coup, always happen in Thai political system, okay, because it never been wrong, it's always correct, okay. Anyway, so we look at the okay, so this is the after the new assembly, okay, loyal people assembly, they produced, the 1974 constitution, okay. So this constitution is not too bad, compared to 1948, 49, or 1968, from Thanom, Seri Thanom, constitution, not very favorable, okay. 74, tried to fix, many things, and also it came as a result of student uprising. So this constitution, for the first time, it gave, the voting right, to students. So that means make 18 years old, eligible to vote, okay, because the drafter members said we have to be careful to students because they, uh, start this, demonstration, to call for constitution. So without student uprising, demonstration from the beginning, Thanom government would not give, constitution back to the Thai people. We're gonna have wait for another 10 years, like sorry, 8 years, okay. So that's why, the youth, the young generation, start to have your voting right, from this constitution, okay. All right, so after constitution, done, there will be election. The 12th election, was in 1975, and the old party, Democrat Party, won many seats, but not the majority. They have to join with the coalition party, Finally, Mom Rachung Seni Pramod became the leader of the party, and he supposed to set up the government because he got able to get the majority vote in the parliament. But the first day, after announced that, okay, Democrat gonna set up our new government, and they have to passing the call confidence vote, whether the government, the parliament, accept or not. After the debate, on their policy, their performance, they failed. They failed the vote because the other opposition parties, and small parties got together and did not support Democrat Party. So Saini had to call for a new, formation of the government. So next, Momrachong Kukrit Pamod, his younger brother, came. Kukrit by that time set up his own party called Social Action Party, SAP, SAP, Pak SAP. The SAP party, able to convince the other party to join with them. Finally, set up the little, majority, not a big majority, but just barely, passed the confidence vote in the House, in the Parliament. So Kukrit became the Prime Minister in 1975. Okay, but that time, political situation were very bad because there were many demonstrations. Workers, factory workers also demand their wages. The farmers, peasants in the northeast, also demand, the reduce of the land rent, and fees of their land, the distribution. So many problems, coming to the government. Okay, and I will talk more in the later. Let me give you the chronology first. Anyway, so Kukrit became prime minister less than a year. He had to call, dissolve the parliament. He cannot govern. Okay, call for a new election in next year, early February 1976. The new election came. This time, Democrat Party won. Momrachong Saini was prime minister in 1976. Okay. So what happened in 1976? Before October 1976, in September, former Prime Minister Thanom Kittikachorn, who already exiled, to live in Boston, USA, quietly, he sneaked back into Thailand. He flew from Boston to Singapore, and from Singapore he ordained as a novice, Samnen. He cannot ordain as a monk, okay, because you need a quorum of monks, to ordain, and there was no Thai Buddhist temple in Singapore to do that. So he can only do a novice, and then flew into Bangkok, in September. So students, got together and protest against Sanom comeback, because Sanom was the murderer. He killed 70 or 50 students, at this October, 73. So the student want, Sanom to be chased out. You kick him out, from the country, or have to put him, into jail or do something, which the government didn't want to do that, and they cannot get Sanom out, because he ordained as a monk and stayed at Wat Bawar Nivet. And the next day, the queen, gave arms, providing, food and robe, to Thanom as a monk. So all the loyalists came to support, Thanom, that, he as a monk, he's not dangerous, don't do against him, whatever, But students said, no, we have to stick with our demand that Thanom had to go out, So that into, October 6th, that the day that the loyalists, the anti-students group, got together, and stormed, the campus in early morning, and then killed, hundreds of students, and injured thousands of them, and then in the evening, another group of army, made a coup d'etat against Saini government, and that ended, the so-called, era, of democracy in October 1970s. Okay. So next we're gonna look at the analysis of So who were the new generation of 1970s? Okay. First, we have to look at Thai society, post World War II. That means after World War II, the flowering of socially concerned literature. That was the period from 1950s, the period of opening up of Thai literature, newspaper, that was the end of Pibun period. Okay, so many ideas, including many radical ideas, socialism, even communism, Communist Party also, organized and widespread in big cities, okay. And then by the time of Soviet, American also influenced Thai economy into a long boom, so gave birth to a real Thai middle class. For most of the modern period of Thai history, we saw mostly the bureaucrat, upper class nobility, and after 1932, the fading, the nobility, no longer, exists, okay, gone. But the new so-called middle class also not that strong, okay. So most of the new people, coming, mostly come from the bureaucracy. This is educated people, educated in country or outside the country, okay. But by the time of American era means from Surrey to Thanong, 19 late 50s to 1960s and to 70s, okay. So this was the period that, okay, we see expansion of Thai economy, Thai society, okay, and also the so-called, Thai middle class. Okay, middle class means those who mainly, operate in the big cities and have their professions, okay, careers, salary, and have the idea of improvement. They want new life, new ideas, okay, enjoy, modernity, okay. They're not farmers, they're not working in the farms, okay. They're working in office, in big, now more industries coming in, okay. So one side you have the new economy, new middle class. On the other side, a big expansion of police forces, the military, okay, all kind of military, section, also increase at this time, including police, okay, police, border patrol police also came up at this period under American support, okay. And then another big bureaucracy also education, because education was the big policy with American support. American loves education, okay. So they give more money, give scholarship for Thai students to study in America, okay. And the next is the so-called rapid commercialization of agriculture. Okay, we touched a little bit. We'll talk about development under Soviet, that means agriculture became commercialized, okay. Everything had to produce for the market, okay, not for your own subsistence, okay, consumption, but you have to make consumption for outsider, okay. So put the farmers into the wider labor market, and also, but that means, they have to loan more money, borrow money, to cultivate, to increase productivity, or to do new crops, okay, yeah. So end up, if without good support management, most farmers end up, in debt, okay, losing their land, losing their farms, and losing, some of their daughters, went to work in factories, some went to do prostitutes in bar, nightclubs, okay. That was the scene, under American era, that many cities, turned to, serving the need of the American soldiers, recreation, come to massage parlors, to nightclubs, to bars, to drinking session, all kind of, the sleaze, business, okay, happen here, okay. So after commercialization, you have road building, you have electricity. Even Buddhism also expanded during this period of American, okay. So monks, also enjoy, modernity, okay. All right, okay. But the core of American era still was education expansion, okay. In 1972, there were altogether 17 universities. The student body, more than 100,000, okay, students enrolled, okay. That was the biggest number in Thailand, okay, right. And then of that, new generation, many students study to go abroad, and now they go to study in America, okay. For the first time, the Thai student went to America the most, okay. And also American students also came to Thailand, many at that time, okay. So this is what we call, the spreading of capitalist relations to many parts of the country, okay. Capitalist relation mean, people now have to spend your labor working for others, production, other people, okay. And so you become workers, you become white collars or blue collars, working in office, in industries, in factory, all kind of, okay. So this new relation, also give you a new set of ideas, of values, okay. People now start to look for money, okay. And government also support this idea, work for money, okay. More work, more money, okay. So people start to like a worldly benefit, look for worldly happiness, okay. So all kind of, change happening in Thailand. Another important one happened was in the provinces. Now, in the old days, in the provinces, you have a small, local mafia, local, nobility or something. But now, you have this new rich coming from the people who did business with government or with American forces, okay. Now they able to earn, a lot of money, millions of the rich, okay, within that reach, okay. But at the same time, the rural tendency, rate also increase, okay. People lose the land, and the new rich, start to buy up more lands to build, the nightclubs, to build their garage, build their factories, build their all kind of, service area, factories, okay. So the rural people start to migrate, they forced to migrate, to work in Bangkok as workers, okay, and they live in slums. This time you see more slums in Bangkok, happening, okay. So that's why American impact on Thai society was crucial for this period, okay. In 1968, there were 46,000 U.S. servicemen, including Army, military, Air Force, navies, advisors, all kind of, the U.S. officers, in Thailand, okay, almost 50,000, okay. And there were at least 8 military bases, plus a small, base, elsewhere, but big 8 military bases from the north in the Doi Intanon, that's a famous one, the military radar base, in Isan, Udon, Ubon, down to Utapao. Okay, at that time Utapao was built by American air bases for American use only. The Thai airplane never allowed to land in Utapao in the 70s. Okay, so only Americans. Okay, Utapao just lately, after building the Suvarnabhumi, that start open up, Utapao. Okay. So what we call Americanization, this is the word, the concept that explain, mobilization, the everything in Thailand, developmentization, the country, adhering to American model, spread all over the country. Okay. You can see almost everywhere in Thailand that time, American soldiers walking in the market. Okay. And then next, increase prostitution. For the first time in Thai history, that Thai women, became known all over the world that Thai women were prostitutes. Okay, this is the label came with Americanization. Okay, and next were red hair children in the airbase. Many new generation of red hair children, grown up here. And then together with narcotics addicts, okay, all kind of drugs, came in with the military supplies. Okay. And also academics, business, technocrats, and tourists came to Thailand, to conduct their research, to teach, to do everything, like Thailand as another state belong to the USA at that time. Okay. The result was a decay of Thai traditional arts, culture, and all kinds of Thai practice now declining because it's not modern. Everything has to be American look, American feel. Because you can buy blue jeans, you can buy shirts, you can buy food. At that time, American export everything from America, including meat, sausages, hamburgers, refrigerators, motor cars, motorcycles, shirts, everything, and they sold it inside the U.S. bases for American citizens only, free, no tax, no nothing. It's like American buy this in America. So this land belong to American sovereignty. Okay, but the Thai corruption. So you have the smuggle, the what called the black market. Okay, so the Thai always able to smuggle, the American import, we call PX, okay, American PX or goods, to sell outside this market. So that time you will see some Thai family, enjoy eating, having, American products, even though not going to America, but you enjoy buying every month, American products. Okay. All right. So the two features coming up here now. One, we see the cultural reaction, which still limited to a small group of young intellectuals. Okay. Some Thai intellectual newspaper media, start to criticize, this practice, this so-called American fashion, at that time as a bad practice. Okay. But they cannot criticize in terms of political intervention because that would be against the Thai government. So reaction always focus on culture, okay, in terms of the Thai song. Okay, we want to hear Thai song, not American song. We want to see Thai practice, Thai dress, okay, not like American dress, okay. Then spread through student population and the wider society, And so this cultural reaction, gradually, become widespread, to every campus, every, university, and outside into the population of Thai people. So Thai people start to be critical of American, presence in Thai soil, in Thailand. Okay, And that was a moment that this reaction against Americans became political. All right, okay. And the second feature, the new idea, the new reaction, also shaped by international Americanization. So Americanization not only in Thailand, because at that time American was the world superpower number one. Okay, so everywhere, American fashion, American culture, American movie, Hollywood, dominated every corner of the world, every country. Okay, so reaction against America also came from Europe, came from Japan, came from non-communist countries. Okay, and especially the so-called Vietnam War. Vietnam War was the war that Americans, tried to help, France, to uh, to conquer Vietnam again, not letting Vietnam to be free and independent, because by that time, Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the nationalists, became communist. Okay, because after fighting, with the French and then the Americans, the Vietnamese, national movement knew that if you don't get support from communist countries, you cannot fight against American military forces. And also by using communist ideas, they're able to mobilize, the farmers, the workers, all kinds of people to come join, but to build a new society under socialism. Okay, so they have more, support from the people. So that's why American fought, because they think, that Vietnam going to be communist. So that's why gave American, a legitimate reason to fight in Vietnam, even though, America has no problem with Vietnam at all from the beginning. Okay, Vietnam was not colony of America. Okay, so people now, 90 countries, now anti-American war in Vietnam, because the the more American fought in the war, people can see that no, it's not right. The American cannot, intervene, to stop the Vietnamese independence. Okay, so this idea also came to Thai students. I gave you this picture of the magazine called White Peril, in Thai we call Pai Khao, published in 1971. Okay, most of the articles in this magazine aim at anti-Vietnam War. Okay, talking about the war in Vietnam and the Thai involvement in Vietnam War. At that time, Thai governments did not explain. Thai people still didn't know that Thailand helping America to fight against Vietnam independence movement. Okay, so I also wrote one article in this White Peril, magazine. I was a third-year student at Thammasat student, and the group of students at that time we formed a group called Dome Council, Sapana Dome. Okay, so we come to meet every Friday afternoon, in front of the Dome building. That's the administration building, That's how we call, the Dome Council, because we in front of the dome. Okay, but it also Sapa mean, Parliament, Sapa Putan, the representative Parliament. Okay. But we got information about, Vietnam War from Thai students who study in USA and Europe. Okay, and they wrote, to tell us about what happened in America, in Europe, in the magazine called Social Science Review, สังคมศาสตร์ปริทัศน์ in Thai. Okay, this is my poem called, to a political intellectual, by the Guatemalan, poet and revolutionary, Okay, I translate into Thai and published in the White Peril magazine, try to to bring awareness, political awareness to Thai students. Okay, all right. And this is Social Science Review in 1972 and 73. Okay, this journal became radical. You know? It started as the conservative, cultural conservative magazine. You know, promote Thai study, Thai culture. You know, and by 71, you know, it became, you know, radical. You know, with the new editor. Okay, and focus more on contemporary and political issue. Okay, so like CIA intervene in Thai studies in Thai, you know, university, you know, and also Thai national security. Okay, and next issue against Japanese, you know, goods in Thailand. Okay, and the next issue that talk about the uprising and the constitution. Okay, okay. Next, we talk about the international, you know, influence upon the new ideas of Thai generation, Thai student generation. Another source was so-called revival of Marxism in Thai intellectuals. Okay, so this is important because um, the new ideas and always and have to do with Marxism. So what is Marxism? We mentioned briefly, you know, before that Marxism was the radical idea from Europe, from the West in 19th century, you know, and give birth to the so-called communist doctrine and practices, you know, and led to the revolution of Marxist of Communist Party, you know, that overthrow the capitalist government, okay, and start building a new economy under socialism, okay. So this idea also came, you know, to Thailand in 1940s after World War II, you know. So many, you know, Thai writers, you know, intellectuals, you know, start, you know, translating socialism into Thai or writing, you know, about Marxism in Thai. Okay, the famous, you know, author, you know, journalist was Gulab Sai Padit or Sri Burapha. Okay, he wrote many, you know, novels. Okay, and also many essays, you know, criticize government, you know, from Pibun to Sarit, you know. Okay, and so he was a nationalist and, you know, a good Buddhist and, you know, for very modernist actually, you know, not in terms of social communist idea until he went to Australia after World War II, you know, and came back, you know, and then he saw, you know, Australian government with the working class, you know, government backup, you know, and so he asked why, you know, Australian, you know, government so, I mean, you know, helpful to the workers, you know, and build the society, you know, very, you know, equal, the justice equal, you know, among people, you know. So that's why he think, you know, look like socialist is a good idea, you know. So that's why he became, you know, socialist, you know, and writing, you know, on that way, you know. So this group will say that art is for, you know, people. Okay, art is not for artists, you know, but art is for people. Okay, and he was the leader of the peace movement that became uh, radical, you know, call for the end of nuclear competition among Soviet and USA. Okay, and he was arrested. Okay, and after he released from jail, you know, that's the end of Pibun period. Okay, so he was invited by China. China that time was the first communist in Asia. Okay, invited Thai journalists to Peking. You know, so he went with 50, you know, journalists. You know, during this visit in China, you know, Sarit met a coup. Okay, in 1957, and those who came back, you know, were arrested and put in jail. So Gurab Sahib said, he spent 4 5 years in jail, He think it's very nonsense, fruitless, Your life much better outside the jail, So he said, okay, he can do better in the real life, So he stayed exiled in China. And he lived there until he died in 1974 after the student uprising. Okay. So this is the picture of his writing. He said, I love Thammasat because Thammasat teach me to love the people. ฉันรักธรรมศาสตร์เพราะธรรมศาสตร์สอนให้ฉันรักประชาชน That was the motto, the writing of Gulab Saipudit. He came to study at Thammasat for briefly for 2 years, Okay. So that's why he saw the spirit of Thammasat as the, practiced by students, that they have to go to serve the people. Okay. So after the October uprising, or even a little bit before October, students of that 1970 generation began to rediscover radical thinking of 1940s and 50s. So we read the book by Gulab, by other, the socialist literature at that time, And now, this is the most famous intellectual from Chulalongkorn, okay, Jit Pumisak. Jit Pumisak probably was the first Thai student, okay, who learned by himself, about Marxism. But he also arrested and put in jail with the real communists at that time, during Surit, after the peace movement, he was arrested in 1960, okay, and stayed in jail for 6-7 years, So he learned about communism from those cadres in the prison, but he also practiced his writing, So he produced the first Thai history of the radical Thai history called The Real Faces of Thai Feudalism Today. The English translation by Craig Reynolds, published at Cornell. You can find this book, in the library. You can read the English version. But this is the Thai version, Chomna Sakdina Thai. That was the most popular Thai history ever published in Thailand. Okay. And it was banned, censored by the government. And after uprising in 73, we published again, and circulated very popular. Okay. Now look briefly, Jit was punished as a student, because of his radical idea in editing July, October 23rd magazine. 23 ตุลา the date of the King Chulalongkorn Day, okay, in 1953, and he wrote 2 articles, 1 poem, 1 article criticizing Buddhism, using so-called Marxism, to criticize it. So the university, stopped that publication, and called, student, came, to investigate Jit Pumisak as a communist, in the auditorium, and throw him down from the stage, a kind of, punishing him, He broke his back, and stayed, in bed for months, before coming back to finish his degree from Chulalongkorn, okay, in Faculty of Arts, okay. So after graduation, he wrote, newspaper, essay, column. He's a good poet. He write many, songs and poems, but all political issues. He criticized, very strong, very, radical, because he, by that time, I think it already, command the Marxist concept of history that called historical materialism. Okay, that means he looked at history as a movement of class struggle from one class to the other, and when class struggle, uh, came to the climax, there must be a revolution happen. The revolution will, destroy one class and give birth to a new class. Okay. So using this method, he criticized, the conventional Thai national history. Okay. So he said, all Thai, the Thai king nobility, were the feudal classes. Okay. So the feudal class always exploited, oppressed the lower class, which were pride, corvée laborers, slaves, okay, and later were working class people, okay. So his book also, censored during Soviet period. Never. So he wrote this book in 1957, but no one ever read it until 1973. We read it, okay. All right, yeah. So that was the. So I make it like a kind of theory and practice that student from 73 to 76 also influenced by Marxist ideas of politics and struggle so that's why they move to join with the working class, with the peasant farmers to help them to set up the Farmers Federation of Thailand, okay, and set up the labor unions in factories, help them to strive to increase their wages, and then call for American withdrawal. American troops have to leave Thailand, okay, close the bases, okay, and finally, start the Socialist Party of Thailand for the first time under the political party, act. Socialist Party, registered and ran for the first time in Thailand, in 1975 election. And they able to get 18 members elected, which is quite a big number, more than 10 MP elected, into the parliament. But they were, boycott, assassinated, in 1975 to 76, and never come back again until now, Socialist Party, is dead, okay, yeah. So only 73, to 76, that the new era of democracy, working, okay. Okay, my last point, okay, is points to think about. Number one, why students became leading forces in political changes. Okay, this is my answer, but you may think and research and do your own, thinking, what is the answer, to this question, Well, one, my answer is that because the so-called parliamentary system did not work or was inefficient, okay. Political parties and political members and what we call the professional politician almost not exist in full, okay, only in name, because they come and they go, because of the coup, okay. And then you have only the system, left only the so-called bureaucratic politician. That means, those who came to government, to parliament, without practicing, because they were bureaucrats, they were army general, they were police chief, they were police, they were civil servants in the government. Okay, so they didn't care about the policy to serve the people because they not care about election. They just care about their power, about their benefit, about their interest. So that's why the system didn't work. Okay, so when development progress, the outcome was illusion. Okay, it didn't make people prosper or have equality, have justice in the system. Okay, and the power always monopolized by the small group of army or bureaucratics. Okay, because there's no check and balance of the system. Okay, that's point one. Okay, question number two. So what factors contributed to the radicalization of the new generation of 1970s? Why? Why students think differently from the previous generation? Why don't they quite just continue their life with the same previous generation? Why they have to come out to protest against the government? The answer, number one, in terms of the internal factors, because the military dominated, the system. Okay, so everywhere, authoritarianism, govern, no freedom, no liberty, no new idea. Okay, that new generation, can enjoy, you can exercise. Okay, the so-called new middle class, students also part of new middle class. Okay, these people came in a new economy with a new education, new culture, because they learn not only from Thai society, but they learn from international context. We can see from movie, from TV, even though a lot less than now, but we can see more by 70, a lot more than 60 or 50. Okay, you can read more books, and then you have Thai students abroad, sending every month, their letters, their story about what happened in outside Thailand. Then we compared and we said, oh, Thailand still very backward, very unequal societies. So what's the problem? Of course, we look up and then we see the military in the government. That's the source of the problem. Okay, and then next, external, we see that American power influence over Thai society is overwhelmed. Too much American practice, so-called Americanization in Thai society. So we start, to look around, and then many revolutions by students happen in everywhere of the world, not only in Thailand. Okay, from Europe to America, to South America, to Latin America, Japan, of course, yeah. So that's why, we start, to form up the idea, that calling, for change, and of course, the first change had to be the constitution, same like this new, the so-called free use movement, and the Kanarasadon 2020. Okay, the same. Okay. All right, so that will sum up my lecture for week 14, October 14, Uprising. Okay. Finally, the reading for this lecture, I still recommend Christian Pasuk, A History of Thailand, chapter 7, okay, ideologies. But you focus the last part, okay, the page 185 to 198. And I gave you the PDF file, introduction by Benedict Anderson in his book In the Mirror. Okay, just a few pages, but 10 pages, talking about the coming of the new student movement in terms of the idea, the culture. Okay. Finally, This is the video clip of October 14th uprising. Okay, you can download it and then see, the full version, half an hour, you can, I think, download very easily in YouTube too. Okay, so I'm gonna stop here for this lecture, and we'll see you next time. Okay, goodbye.